Hey, deserving listeners, it's time to react to your comments on my videos this past week. Let's get to it. First comments that I'm going to react to are your comments to the Brandon and Julia number 8 video. Stella says, regarding Brandon, I guess if you haven't ever really confronted your parents, it constantly gets more and more difficult, awkward, and scary. Yeah, absolutely, Stella. I agree that the longer time goes by and you've never pushed back, the more awkward it becomes to think about confronting your parents and pushing back, and the more scary it gets because it just seems like something that isn't ever attainable, and you just build up all this anticipatory anxiety that may be overblown, hard to know. By the way, I'm wearing a shirt you can get on our Teespring merch site. I think there's a link below for that. Stacy designed this. I think it's super cool. It's just hilarious. I find this shirt to be hilarious, actually. Sunny says, I was engaged to a Brandon type once upon a time. He just floated through life waiting to be told what to do by his mom and his sister. He had no idea what he actually wanted or what a grown-up did without being told. I literally had to give him lunch and beer money every day. He just switched from being told what to do by his mom to being told by me. Not a healthy foundation for a relationship. Yeah, Sonny, I'm guessing, and a lot of people commented that they recognize Brandon in their past. You know, they were with a Brandon in their past, or they are a Brandon. And when you watch the show, the typical responses are just like, what's wrong with this guy? How come he doesn't stand up to his mom? I mean, he's such a mama's boy, this whole narrative around being a mama's boy. But it usually is because of a personality trait, a personality disorder, if you will, and as a result of being traumatized or being treated a particular way as a child. It's not as simple as just yelling at Brandon and saying, stand up for yourself. It's not that simple. And you have experienced someone like that. You watched your partner deal with their parents, and they were always very dependent on, he was very dependent on his mom and his sister. And then when he transitioned away from the mom, he just had to be told what to do by you. Even though you're like trying to help him, he still, even though you weren't being intimidating necessarily, he still had a really hard time knowing what he wanted and asserting that. It literally has to do with knowing what you want. When you are a Brandon, I don't know, total speculation, by the way, but the presentation that Brandon exhibits points to the possibility of somebody who not only has a hard time asserting themselves, but actually doesn't even know what they want. And even if you gave them a free pass and said, look, magic wand, assert yourself, do whatever you want, everyone will have to live with it, and they'll like it. They'll stand there with the magic wand going, but what does everyone want? And you go, no, not this magic wand time. Whatever you want, go for it. And they'll just stand there and they're like, but how do I know what I want unless people tell me what they want me to do? It becomes very frustrating if you're in a relationship with that person. Now, as therapists, we deal with this all the time. We have clients like this occasionally, and we take our time with these people. It takes a long time. But it is possible in therapy to develop that sense of who you are, to develop what you want, and then you can start working on assertiveness. It can take a long time. Andre says, as someone who defied their mom last year, it's tough to do. I had to consciously tell myself that I am an adult. When you ignore their manipulations, they will adapt. So Andre is saying, look, it's a lot harder to push back on controlling parents. It's really tough. And I had to consciously remind myself, I'm an adult, I'm an adult, I'm an adult, even though I feel like, or I'm being treated like I'm a child. But if you ignore their manipulations, if you keep, you stay on course, eventually they will adapt. And that's my experience as well. Okay, going to the Trisha and Ethan videos that I made. Anna, this isn't 90 Day Fiancé, this is a different set of videos. Anna said, I don't know how I feel about Dr. Drew pathologizing exploring gender and trying to make it a sexual thing. Some people just like to explore gender sometimes. It's not always sexual. Absolutely. I was trying to avoid laying into Dr. Drew for various different things, including this, but looking back, absolutely. He seemed to be pathologizing, particularly Ethan, when he was exploring gender and made it into a sexual thing like right away, which is just, I don't know what to say. Fear or Love says, my group therapy facilitator sent out an email today with helpful links, and the very first link was for Dr. Kirk Honda. So be prepared for more Canadian fans. Yeah, it's always a trip when people tell me that their therapist or their professor recommended something that I produced. It's a very strange idea to me. But, I'm very honored by that, and it is part of my mission is to make this sophisticated enough such that therapists or educators can actually say, hey, as an adjunct to my class, you might want to watch this video. It might help. It's music to my ears in that way. I mean, obviously not everything I produce has that potential, but I think some of it does. And Fear Love says, be prepared to have more Canadian fans. Well, yeah, I love Canada. It's a wonderful place up there. And being from Seattle, we're pretty close to Vancouver, BC. Meaton on YouTube says, the thing that bothers me so much about how a show like this, the Frenemy show, is that it gives people the wrong idea of what a mediated conversation in relationship therapy would look like. I think it would make a lot of people less likely to seek out that therapy, even though they might really need it. So Meaton is saying that when you see Dr. Drew on Frenemies, it gives a misrepresentation of what therapy would look like. And then people won't go to therapy because they're like, I don't want to do that. That looks awful. Going back to their comment. I know that I had a very skewed perception of what therapy entailed due in large part to the way the media portrays it. And I've learned so much from you about how wrong and unhelpful these misrepresentations were. Thank you so much for your videos like these and for giving people real expectations of what they can and should get from therapy. I also especially appreciate hearing your thoughts as an educator of therapists. Not only will it probably get more people into therapy, but I think it will also help people to discern whether their therapist is doing right by them or not, and to be able to express their concerns with their therapist directly if not. I feel a lot more confident about creating a relationship with a therapist now. It's music to my ears, Meaton. That is an outgrowth of my mission with this. Certainly not my central mission, but definitely part of my mission. And I'm hearing a lot of people tell me things along those lines that after watching my videos or hearing my podcast, they'll say, maybe I should give therapy a try. Or, maybe that terrible experience I had in therapy wasn't representative of what all therapists are like. All right, going on to Brandon and Julia again, another video. Mary says, thank you so much for the Christmas shout out on Cameo. So just chiming in here, I signed up on Cameo a few weeks ago, and a number of people have had me do Cameo. So if you don't know what Cameo is, it's where you pay like D-level celebrities to wish you happy birthday and stuff. And so I've had a number of people that have done that. We watch your reaction videos religiously as we're 90 Days and Married at First Sight fans. They've sparked several important conversations that we will continue in premarital counseling. Good for you, Mary. Also, we work in special education and life is really bleak right now. Your content has been some much needed wholesomeness that keeps us going and keeps us to stay positive so we can provide the best education we can for our students. Great, Mary. Fantastic. Special education is a much needed profession and it is highly stressful. I have worked very briefly alongside special education educators, and you're a saint, honestly. Good for you, Mary. You're doing wonderful, wonderful work. Crystal says, it's like Brandon is using Julia as a scapegoat. It's not fair because to his parents, she will always be the villain. Yeah. It seems to be headed that way. Not only that Brandon is using Julia as a scapegoat, but that the entire family is going to use Julia as a scapegoat. So Brandon is using Julia as a scapegoat because he is having a lot of anxiety about wanting to assert himself with his mother, but he doesn't know how to do that, and so he is triangulating Julia into that conflict. The parents have a lot of anxiety about the kid. I don't know, total speculation, of course, but I'm guessing that the parents are kind of concerned that Brandon isn't growing up. Now, they're also doing a lot of things to not let him grow up, but I'm guessing they also want him to grow up and be more responsible. They're also, I think, worried that if he does grow up, something bad is going to happen, and then they will be very shameful. It's just a guess. And so they don't know what to do about that with Brandon. They might also feel Brandon's conflict against them. They might feel his disapproval of them. and they are turning to Julia instead and attacking her instead of directly dealing with each other, because there's a lot of anxiety there. When you're a family, you deeply want to be accepted and loved by each other, even your own children. And when you don't know how to navigate yourself through that, there's a tremendous amount of anxiety that if you don't do it right, everyone's going to hate each other. And the prospect of being hated by your own kid, by your only kid, is one of the worst things a parent can imagine. And so that raises the anxiety and raises the need to drag a third into the conflict, i.e. Julia. Lavender says, I've been the Julia in this situation. I've been a Julia. I've been like Julia before, except I wasn't looking for a green card. What people should understand about Brandon types of people is that they've been bullied their entire lives by a domineering and or chastising parent. They're not going to be inspired overnight to defend themselves after entering a relationship. More often than not, the spouse can become the new bully because they become frustrated, fight with their bullied partner, and perhaps fight with the child's parent. Yeah, absolutely. It's Lavender, you hit the nail on the head with that. There's a simplistic way of looking at the Brandon story, which is, I hope that Julia convinces Brandon to stand up to his mom. But that misses the overall picture here, that Brandon might not have the ability to know who he is, and thus he doesn't even know what to assert if he was given the chance to assert himself. And what'll happen a lot of times is the Brandons of the world will choose partners that are like their mom. And so Julia has qualities like that. We'll see. Julia seems differentiated enough, but it's hard to tell. But at the very least, Brandon is socializing Julia to act dominant over him. And you could absolutely imagine in 5 years, say if Brandon did assert himself or the couple did assert themselves against the parents, they move out. You could absolutely imagine a scenario where Brandon still didn't really know what he wanted and didn't assert himself and didn't really have any self-motivated behavior and had a hard time making decisions, and Julia just dictated everything for him. When you see that, then you see the bigger picture and you realize that just yelling at Brandon, or when we watch the show and Julia is starting to yell at Brandon a little bit, that isn't necessarily the answer. If you're really trying to change, if you were Julia and you're really trying to change the situation, yelling at Brandon to force him to become, to defy his mom is just replacing the mom dominance with the Julia dominance. You understand? So if you're in a Julia situation, the long-term solution is Brandon needs to go to therapy and figure out who he is. And you have to, as a partner, maybe help that, maybe point stuff out to him and say like here's one little thing that Julia could do. She could say to Brandon, hey, so I'm noticing that you're having a hard time standing up to your mom, but honestly, I don't know what you want. I know what I want, and I know what I want you to want, but I don't know what you want. So regarding the living, staying in the same room or not, Brandon, what do you want? Because I've told you what I want. I don't want to stay in separate rooms. I want to stay in the same room. What do you want, Brandon? Now, don't be influenced by me. I'm okay if you say, you know what? When it comes down to it, I'd rather please my mom in this situation. I'll be okay with that. I'm not going to lose my crap over that. The main thing is I just want to know what you want. And I don't want to be another dominant person in your life to squash any kind of individuality you have. So I really want you to know that I'm open to whatever you have to say. And then really take the time and have patience around helping Brandon to land on, without any pressure from you as the partner, as to what he really wants. Now, does Julia want to do that? I don't know. Does anyone really want to do that? I don't know. But that would be the process forward. And if Julia were to come to me and say that she was very frustrated with her Brandon, this is the kind of stuff that I would maybe throw out there for Julia. Steamed Bun says, Dr. Kirk talking about a lot of sex when I can't find my headphones. Awesome. So I don't know if that makes sense. So Steam Bun is saying they didn't have headphones and they're watching a video and I start talking about a lot of sex stuff and other people can overhear, and they're scrambling to find their headphones, and Steam Bun is like, awesome, I love that. Cecile is saying, I am from the South, and the mom not wanting them to have sex under her roof would not be that uncommon. I don't agree with it, but it is a reality in the South. I agree, Dr. Honda. Have less of a wedding and get their own place because the mom probably isn't going to change her mind and she's going to continue to stick her nose in their business. Yeah, interesting. Thanks for agreeing with me on that. Certainly, again, I would say that as a therapist, I don't care, but as a citizen, that if I was Brandon's friend, for example, I would throw that out to him. I'd just be like, dude, give up on the expensive wedding and the reception. Just move out, because if you don't, one, your life's going to be miserable. Two, it could threaten the status of your relationship with Julie. Just move out. Just, enjoy like you seem like you really love each other. You don't have a lot of conflict. If you just lived on your own, even if it was like the crappiest apartment in all of Virginia, you're better off there than you are at home. Naithra says, Brandon reminds me of myself as a teen, especially the dynamics with a controlling mom and not being able to voice what I want. In my early 20s, when I started going to therapy, I learned how to express what I wanted and needed, and she did not respond very well, so it is very tough. It was not just one event of being assertive, but hundreds of events of being assertive with her. And there are still battles to this day. So I think seeing Brandon makes me really sad and wonder where I would be without that therapy. Thanks for sharing. You're saying that you were like Brandon, and it took hundreds of events of pushing back on the mom to change the dynamic, and you still have battles today. And so good for you for getting that therapy and for having the life that you deserve. Yo says, I think Brandon videos are interesting because I'm learning how important a sense of self is. I had a dispute with my landlord yesterday, and I was able to be assertive and keep relatively calm because I first figured out what I wanted in the situation. Then I thought of Dr. Honda and how he said that you have to know what you want to be assertive. That is so true. Such great learning. Yeah. A common knee-jerk reaction that people will have to someone like Brandon is just like, hey, you just have to stick up for yourself. You just have to yell at the mom. Well, that assumes that you know what Brandon wants or that Brandon knows what he wants. Mostly that's a reflection of what you want. When people are yelling at Brandon to stand up to the mom, it's probably more what you want, not necessarily what Brandon wants. And particularly as Julia is starting to yell at Brandon, she's yelling at Brandon assuming that she knows what Brandon wants. The Brandons of the world are blank canvases that we can project whatever we want to on because they don't even know who they are or what they want. Total speculation. But for Yo, you're saying that you were heading into a conflict with your landlord, and the knee-jerk reaction is just like, I just got to let him have it. I've just got to fight back and tell that landlord that they're stupid. And instead of pausing and saying, okay, wait, so what do I want? What's my goal out of this interaction? There's a lot at stake here. And what's the outcome that I would like from my life? This is actually a major piece of differentiation. You hear me talk about this a lot. To be differentiated means that you're goal-oriented, meaning that you understand your goals and you seek to meet those goals, that you don't just react to things, that you think of the bigger picture. You're heading into a conflict with the landlord. What do you want? Well, you probably want the landlord to maybe fix something in your apartment or something. And you also want to enjoy your time in that rental. Like, say you really let the landlord have it. You say, I got a lawyer, or I'm going to get you. And your lawyer complies. But from that point forward, your lawyer and you hate each other. And there's always massive amounts of emotional tension because of the way you dealt with it. Is that what you want? Maybe. Maybe you're just like, I don't care if I have a terrible relationship with my landlord after this event. I need them to fix the plumbing. And I don't care if I burn that bridge. I'm moving out of here in 6 months anyway. Who cares? Okay, fine. That's your goal. But define what you want and then move towards that goal. Do behavior. Make a plan to meet those goals. Don't just react to things out of some sense of emotionality. You have to now maybe those emotions are helpful to guide you. For sure, you want to listen to that, but you also want to think logically about not logically, but sort of bigger picture and trying to predict, use your reasoning to figure out what to do. Ian says, I'm curious what therapy and goals would you recommend to Brandon if he were your client? How long do you think it would take Brandon to gain his voice and start expressing his needs? It's a great question. So if Brandon were my client, what kind of therapy would I use? What goals would I have? And how long would it take? Well, I don't know, because I would have to assess Brandon, and there's no way I can know him by watching a reality TV show. But if my sort of main speculation about his personality is at least somewhat accurate, which I would have no way of knowing, I would recommend that he engage in relational therapy with me, meaning interpersonal therapy, meaning that I provide corrective experiences for him so that he can shed his dependent personality traits and gain a sense of who he is. It's not really a particular kind of therapy, but you could consider it psychodynamic therapy in a sense, interpersonal therapy. But it has a lot to do with me as someone that is a secure attachment for someone. So first I would establish secure attachment. I do this with all clients and students and supervisees, by the way. And then once they feel safe with me and they feel like they can depend on me, that I am attuned to them and that I care, then I can actually provide corrective experiences where I actually ask them what they want. Now, they'll get anxious in that situation because they're just, I don't know what I want. And then I provide that safety and I keep asking. It's okay that you don't know what you want, but I'm going to continue to ask because I'm very curious about what you want and how you feel and who you are. And even if it's something that I don't want, even if you want to say that I'm a bad therapist, like I want you to feel free at the very least to feel those feelings and at best to express those things, especially to me. You rinse and repeat that enough times and people gain that sense of who they are. How long would it take? Years. That sort of work is minimum 2 years of weekly therapy, maybe 5 years of every other week, that kind of thing. It takes a long time. You have to make up for a lot of damage done early in life. To develop a sense of self as a child, it takes years. From the time you're 1 until you're 4 or 5 years old, that's the window of time that you develop that sense of self. So if you miss that time, it's going to take longer in therapy. That's always how it works. It's like you can learn a language very quickly when you're 2 years old. Learning a brand new language when you're 45 takes years, and you never really get fully fluent. It's the same with a sense of self. It's a much longer process as an adult. That's why we want to do it when we're actually more of a sponge to what's happening around us at the time. And it also is reflective of the fact that even if you do work on it as an adult, you'll never be as fluent in a sense of self as someone who got enough attunement at that critical age. Jovi and Yara video. Evelina says, fellow Eastern European here, why do Americans call it the Ukraine? Nobody says the France or the Italy. It's just Ukraine. Yeah, agreed. There's some history there. It doesn't justify it, but for decades, it was referred to as the Ukraine. In the United States, textbooks and news coverage would refer to it as the Ukraine because it was part of the Soviet Union. And it was referred to as a region, not a country. It was the Ukraine. It's sort of like the South or the Pacific Northwest. Seattle is in the Pacific Northwest, so it was the Ukraine. And when Ukraine gained independence, I believe in the early 90s, if I'm not mistaken, a long time ago, that's when officially it was just referred to as Ukraine. It'd be like if the Pacific Northwest around Seattle gained independence from the United States or gained statehood or something. You wouldn't call it the Pacific Northwest anymore. You would just call it Pacific Northwest. Well, because people have heard it for so many decades, the Ukraine prior to the 90s, it gets really stuck in people's heads, and then they repeat that mistake to younger generations who acquire that phrasing. And, Americans are really slow learners, and so the fact that they're still saying the Ukraine is, just an offshoot of that. And I'm not even sure if I haven't made that mistake in these videos. I hope I haven't, because I would like to think that I shed that habit a long time ago. But, for the first 25 years of my life, it was the Ukraine. It's hard to rewire your brain in that way. But anyway, to my understanding, that's the reason why people still refer to it as the Ukraine. That's just off the top of my head. I'm not entirely sure if that's accurate. But everyone, make sure you refer to it as Ukraine. Do not call it the Ukraine. It's a country like France, United States. Well, that is the United States. But Russia, Italy, Ukraine, Poland, just say that. Don't say the. It's demeaning. It reminds people in Ukraine of their colonial past, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, Queen's Gambit video, Angie says, fun fact, I live on the second floor of the building where Benny lives in a downtown Toronto apartment. The filming crew even had to ask me to clear my windows and turn the lights off. Well, Angie, that is a fun fact that they filmed Benny's apartment in your building. Emmeline, I think it's a lot more of a profound experience to watch it as a woman because it does such a good job of telling a feel-good story for one of our own. I know my mom and I loved it so much while my dad and boyfriend just enjoyed it. Right, so Emmeline is talking about how I was talking about in that audio episode when we talked about Queen's Gambit, around that I imagine that for women, they would really enjoy watching this. Men would enjoy watching it too, of course. I enjoyed watching it. But if I was a woman, I would have enjoyed it even more. In the same way that as an Asian person, when I see, an okay movie, but it has Asians at the forefront, then I enjoy it even more. Crazy Rich Asians is a good example. It's just a rom-com. It's really nothing special about that. I thought that the lead actress did a great job. Constance Wu, I think. I thought she did a great job. But, it's a rom-com. It's not a profound story of any kind. But because it centered on a lot of Asians, I enjoyed it tremendously more because I'm finally seeing my people with my face on the screen with Asian cultural elements thrown in there. It feels more satisfying after watching thousands and thousands of white people on the screen, which I'm okay with. But you just get real thirsty to see your people and your culture represented in a story. It just feels nice. And so the fact that this has it has a woman at the center of a story, that's kind of rare. And then you have a woman that's competent at something, which is also rare. And, a woman that's not there just to fall in love with someone, for example. Nothing wrong with a story like that. But a lot of times if a woman is center, her mission, the plot is her falling in love and finding Mr. Right. And eventually you just get tired of seeing that plot line over and over again. So to see a woman at the center, satisfying. To see a woman that's competent, satisfying. And see a woman that's competent in a man's world, even more satisfying. And so Emmeline was essentially agreeing with my speculation as what I was saying. All right. I did an episode on answering all of your Christmas questions. It took me 3 hours and my voice got real hoarse by the end, but some people had some comments here. Tasha, good old Tasha from the live events had a comment. I am so happy that you posted this. It made my originally very depressed Christmas a lot better. Thank you so much. That's great, Tasha. I'm glad that you were with me during those 3 hours. Eva, 100% agree to leading by example with your children. I grew up in a very environmentally conscious family where it was completely normal not to litter, to donate money and items, not to be greedy, to think about the environment, to buy local and organic, etc. Right. So in the episode, I was talking about leading by example to your kids. If you want to influence your kids, lead by example. And kids usually will really incorporate your values as they see them being played out in their lives. For example, for me, as a young teenager, I remember I had a classist, I had absorbed classism from my society. I grew up in a very lower middle class family. My dad worked at Boeing. My mom had a daycare. Anyway, point is that we were, sort of mainstream, if you will. We weren't poor, we weren't rich. And I had absorbed a lot of the classism of my society. And I'd never really had a conversation with anyone about the classist ideas that were being pumped into my head. Well, I was being driven to school by a friend of the family, and I ridiculed some workers who were working on, they were laborers, they were doing manual labor, and I looked at them as we were driving to school, and I was like, I said some sort of disparaging comment. And then she, the friend of the family, went to my parents and told on me, which I'm actually quite happy about. When I got home, my parents sat me down and were very angry at me. And they said, so the friend of the family said, you said this, this, and this. And I was like, yeah. And I remember feeling like, well, aren't we supposed to make fun of lower class people? Isn't that what we're all supposed to be doing? And my parents just really laid into me. Now, keep in mind, this was 35 years ago, and I can remember it like it was yesterday. It was very impressionable on me. And I remember my parents really made sure that that I understood that that was wrong. And I thought about a lot of the things that my parents did. They lived by that rule. I don't think there were a lot of overt messages around that, but there were messages around that. And I don't know if you've listened to this podcast, but I hate classist notions. Now, I will exhibit classist notions because we've all absorbed classism, no matter what rank we have in our societal sort of ranking system. But I get real upset when people get classist. Like one of the things when I was watching Tiger King, actually, about halfway through the second episode, because it was all the rage, everyone was watching Tiger King and constantly talking about it. And I was looking at all the memes online and stuff, and people are making fun of everybody. And I remember enjoying it and thinking, wow, this is quite a kind of like a circus of weirdos kind of a thing. And then I stopped myself about halfway through the second episode, and I was like, oh no, I'm enjoying this show because it taps into my classism. I'm looking down on these people. These people have markers of low class, working class. They have all those markers. And I am laughing at them, either inward, I'm quietly laughing or just loudly laughing at them. And then I thought, oh no, everyone's enjoying this show. I'm thinking because of the classism elements to it. And when we made an episode about it on the podcast, I called it classism porn because it just gives us this opportunity to ridicule other people based on classist notions. Now, of course, there's a whole other side to it, which is animal cruelty and the crimes that are occurring. So those you can ridicule. People committing crimes, people treating animals badly, you can absolutely ridicule that. You can shame that. But other things, like when I think his name was John, he's not wearing a shirt during the entire interview process and just laughing at him and, put a shirt on, or, it has those kinds of elements in it. And yeah, I instantly was like, I don't like this thing. I don't like what this is tapping in me. And since we haven't had a movement on classism in our society the way we have with sexism and racism, it's largely invisible. Danny says, since you brought up time management and punctuality, can you please do a podcast about this? I am someone who is always running late and struggles to manage my time. It makes me feel extremely guilty and not dependable. I want to know more about the psychology of lateness and poor time management. Yeah, well, first tip, go to my website, go to the episode list. There's a list of all the episodes just by name. And on there, I have an episode called Time Management Tips. Now, you have to be a patron of the podcast, I believe, to listen to that episode. And it came out 3 years ago, and it is number 617. So number 617 episode came out October 2017, called Time Management Tips. I go into full detail. I am one of the most time management oriented people I have ever met. My wife is pretty good too, but I am extremely punctual and extremely good with my time. From a very early age, I'm frequently thinking about how can I shave off 5 minutes from this process, because time is money, and also time is leisure, and time is creativity. The fact that I can do this people will say sometimes, it's like, you're a professor, you're a therapist, you're a supervisor, you're in a band, you have a podcast, you have a YouTube channel, you have a family, you have animals. You have all these things, and how do you do it all? Time management, my friend. Time management. I'm not a superhuman. I just really make sure that I don't waste my time. I don't just sit, if I'm ever doing something that I could be doing something, like if I'm doing the dishes, well, I could listen to a podcast and learn something at the same time. So, it's just an example of that. Or if I'm going to the store, I'll think, well, I have to do an errand tomorrow. Could it wait to go to the store tomorrow? And then I could do 2 errands with 1 trip. I'm always thinking about that kind of stuff. And then it also applies to my work. When I'm at the university, I'm thinking, okay, how can I best use my time that I have at the university? What's the best use of my time? I have these tasks I have to do. How can I do it in the shortest time possible while not losing in quality? There's just a lot of thinking. And so it's a skill set. And when people say, I'm just really bad with managing my time, I'm late a lot, I seem to always be running out of time, and people are just like, how do I change this? Well, it's like anything else. It's like learning how to play tennis. You don't just say, wow, I'm really, you've never played tennis before, and you're just like, wow, I'm really terrible at tennis. Well, anyway, moving on with life. If you want to get good at tennis, you got to practice it. You got to watch the YouTube videos. You got to start thinking about, okay, this is what I have to do and you got to do the reps. You just got to keep at it and keep doing it. Time management is no different. You have to dedicate yourself to it. And the thing that I find is that when I manage my time really well, it frees up so much time so that I can do what I want to do. And that's another part of it, honestly, is like I was raised well enough to really value my time. And so when I'm wasting my time or someone else is wasting my time, which is even worse, then I get real upset because I believe that I deserve to have time to do what I want to do, which is this podcast, actually. Everything I do on this podcast, I do with my extra time. And so I want to do this among other various things that I like to do. And if someone's wasting my time or I'm wasting my time, I feel like I am getting ripped off on life. I have one life to live, and I got a lot to cram in that amount of time. And if I'm wasting my time, then I get real angry because if someone's wasting my time or I'm wasting my time, then I'm not squeezing all the juice out of life. I want to squeeze all of the juice. I don't want to squeeze 10% of the juice. I want the whole thing. And in order to do that, I've got to have the time to be able to do it. And in order to have the time, I've got to have time management practices, and I've got to have habits, and I've got to do all sorts of things. And so that's what I'll say about that. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.